They always say Michael Jackson trusted the wrong people. But what if the truth is different? What if he knew exactly who would turn their back on him, long before the world even suspected? In this fictional story, one mysterious journal, hidden away and sealed by Michael himself, contains a list of names and warnings the world was never meant to see. A chilling message left by the greatest reformer who ever lived. When they hurt me, they will reveal themselves. Tonight, we open the pages of a secret only Michael knew, a warning he wrote with shaking hands, a prophecy that would come true. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss an emotional story honoring Michael Jackson's legacy. Michael Jackson sat alone in his rehearsal dressing room at the Staples Center, the vibrant noise of dancers and musicians echoing faintly through the walls. The world outside celebrated his comeback. This is it, a promise of brilliance, perfection, and a resurrection of the greatest entertainer who had ever lived. But inside this room, the air was heavy. Michael's hands rested on a leather-bound journal, one he kept hidden from everyone, even those who claimed they wanted the best for him. Its pages held truths he dared not speak aloud, fears, regrets, and now names. His fingers hovered over the pen, trembling slightly. The words he had written earlier stared back at him like shadows refusing to disappear. They will turn on me. I already know their faces. He swallowed hard, tapping the pen nervously. His heartbeat echoed in his ears, fast, uneven, frightened. His eyes flickered toward the door every few seconds, as if expecting someone to burst through it. It wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. The kind of instinct you develop when your entire life has been backstage negotiations, headlines, lawsuits, rumors, masks, and betrayal disguised as brotherhood. Michael wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve and closed the journal halfway, afraid someone would enter and read what he feared most, the truth he had kept buried for years. A faint knock broke the silence. "Michael?" A familiar voice asked softly. It was Kenny Ortega, his trusted director and one of the very few people who still talked to him like he was human, not a product. Michael forced a smile, masking every trace of fear. "Come in." Kenny stepped inside, immediately sensing the tension. Michael was pale, more than usual, and his posture stiff. The room felt colder than the hallway behind him. "You okay?" Kenny asked, lowering his voice. Michael hesitated before nodding, just thinking. Kenny approached slowly. "Rehearsal's going great. Everyone's excited. The fans are excited. They just want to see you shine again." Michael looked away, his gaze falling back onto the journal. "That's what they think," he whispered. Kenny's expression softened. He sat beside Michael, keeping a gentle distance. "What's worrying you?" Michael drew in a shaky breath. He had learned to hide his emotions his entire life. Vulnerability was punished in his world. But tonight, something inside him was cracking. "There are people," Michael began quietly. "People who say they love me. People who say they want to help me. But they don't. They want control." Kenny stayed silent, letting him speak. Michael's fingers curled tightly over the journal. "I know what they're planning. I can feel it. It's getting closer." His voice trembled, not with weakness, but resignation. He wasn't guessing. He knew. "Who?" Kenny asked gently. Michael glanced toward the door again, then leaned closer and whispered, "I wrote it down. Every name. Everyone I can't trust anymore. If anything happens to me," his throat tightened, "I need someone to know." Kenny stared at him, stunned, unsure if these fears were grounded in reality, or if exhaustion and medication were twisting his mind. "Michael, listen to me," Kenny said, placing a steady hand on his arm. "You're safe right now. We're all here for you. There's no one against you." Michael's eyes filled with a glassy mix of fear and heartache. He shook his head slowly. "No, Kenny, they smile in front of me. But behind my back," his voice cracked, "behind my back, they're waiting for me to fall." The silence that followed was suffocating. Kenny moved closer. "If someone is making you feel threatened, I need to know who it is." Michael's jaw tensed. "I can't tell you yet. I need to be sure." At that moment, the doorknob turned. Michael instinctively shut the journal and slid it under a folded jacket on the table, Quick practice, terrified. Dr. Conrad Murray entered without knocking, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp. There you are, Michael. We need to check your vitals before the second run. Michael stiffened. Kenny stood up, protective. We were in the middle of something, Conrad. Murray barely acknowledged him. Michael's health is my responsibility. If I don't do my job, there won't be a second run. Michael forced a gentle, diplomatic tone, one he mastered long ago. It's okay, Kenny. I'll be fine. Murray smiled tightly, a smile without warmth. We don't want the king of pop fainting on stage, do we? Michael's eyes followed him cautiously as Murray set equipment on the table right above the hidden journal. His heart clenched. That journal could cost him everything if the wrong eyes found it. As Murray wrapped a blood pressure cuff around Michael's arm, he leaned in too close, his tone shifting into something darker, meant only for Michael to hear. Don't overthink things. Just focus on performing. Leave everything else to us. Michael's chest tightened, anxiety choking his breath. Us. Murray didn't say me. He said us. Kenny stood in the corner, watching, unaware of the storm brewing between them. Michael made eye contact with Murray, not with fear, but with a silent promise. I know who you are. I wrote your name down. And the room seemed to shrink around him, because now the journal was no longer just a secret. It was evidence. Evidence someone would do anything to destroy. Michael closed his eyes for a second, whispering to himself, I have to finish writing before it's too late. The beat of his heart thudded like a warning drum. Somewhere deep down, Michael felt it. This wasn't just another rehearsal night. It was the night he realized. Someone was already preparing for his final curtain call, and they were closer than he ever imagined. Michael remained seated at the edge of his bed, gripping the small leather journal against his chest like it was the only thing keeping him alive. The dim lamp cast a fragile circle of light over the room, while the rest fell into uneasy darkness. His breathing had slowed, but the fear, the dread, still clung to him like a second skin. He wasn't afraid of the dark. He was afraid of what waited inside it. The knocking downstairs had stopped. The footsteps had vanished. Whoever was there, if someone truly was, had retreated into silence. But it wasn't a comforting silence. It was a plotting silence. Michael opened the journal slowly. His fingers brushed over the first page, the list he dreaded reading, a list of names written in his own handwriting, but with a hand that trembled each time he added a name. A list he swore he would never show the world, because these were not enemies. They were people he once trusted, people who had taken pieces of his life, his childhood, his happiness, people who smiled at him publicly and sharpened their knives in private. Some names were familiar: family, advisors, doctors, executives. Others were ghosts from other decades, people who had disappeared but not been forgotten. And then the last name, a name he still hadn't written. He dragged the pen down the paper, hesitating where that final name should go. His hand trembled harder. He closed his eyes, afraid that seeing it on paper would make it true. All his life, Michael had chosen forgiveness over anger, mercy over revenge. He believed in goodness, even when the world laughed at him for it. But tonight, forgiveness felt dangerous. He heard a soft click, the door, not the bedroom door. One outside, a brief metallic sound that could have been anything or everything. Michael shut the journal, clutching it to his chest again. His heart began beating too fast, too loud. His mind flashed back to years ago. Dressing rooms, closed meetings, contracts shoved under his nose, fake smiles and hidden threats. The feeling was the same. Power closing in. A faint light glowed under his bedroom door, shadows moving. Someone was walking the hallway again. He stood slowly. His knees trembled. He whispered, as if to himself, "They can't have it. They can't know what I know." Footsteps paused right outside. Michael stumbled backward, breath caught in his throat. His fingers dug into the journal, so tightly that the leather creaked under pressure. And then, a soft knock. Not aggressive, not loud, gentle, too gentle. Michael, a voice called, a calm voice, a voice he recognized instantly. "Open the door, Michael. We need to talk." It was Dr. Murray. Michael backed away faster, shaking his head like a terrified child. No, not now. Please, not tonight. Michael, you're anxious, Murray said, still in that calm, professional tone. You called me earlier. You need your medication. Let me help you. No, Michael whispered. You came before I called. A pause. Then Murray tried again. I'm worried about you. If you don't sleep tonight, tomorrow's performance will fall apart. You can't disappoint them. Michael squeezed his eyes shut. There it was. The pressure, the manipulation. Disappoint them. Disappoint the fans. Disappoint the world. What about disappointing himself? His voice broke. I'm tired. I'm so tired performing for everyone. Another pause. Then the voice on the other side dropped lower. You're only tired because your mind is playing tricks on you. Let me inside. I'll make it all go away. That terrified him more than anything. Michael took 2 more steps back, until his back hit the wall. There was a creak. Murray testing the doorknob. Locked. Thank God. Michael whispered. Go away. Silence. Then Murray's tone changed, colder, slightly annoyed. I'll be downstairs. But think carefully, Michael. You can't afford to make the wrong decision tonight. Footsteps moved away. Slow, controlled, calculated. Michael exhaled shakily. His legs weakened, and he slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, knees to his chest. The journal slipped from his hands and fell open beside him. The list stared back at him, a silent accusation. A plea. Every name had contributed to his downfall. Every name had helped squeeze the magic out of his life. Every name had pushed him closer to this night. The last name, the one he refused to write, haunted him most. He reached for the pen again, tears blurring his vision. The journal felt heavier now, like a weight full of memories he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. If something happens to me, this has to survive, he whispered. Slowly, painfully, he dragged the pen down to the final blank line. Just 2 letters. That's all he managed. 2 letters that could destroy a life, or save his legacy. But the moment the ink touched the page, a thunderous crash echoed downstairs. Michael gasped. The pen slipped from his fingers. Voices. Raised. Chaotic. Not one voice this time. Multiple. Someone shouting orders. Someone moving furniture. Footsteps running. Michael scrambled to his feet, heart exploding in terror. Someone had entered the house. Someone who wasn't supposed to. And they weren't hiding anymore. Michael grabbed the journal, clutching it against his chest like a lifeline. He stared at the door, breathing fast, dizzy, ready to collapse. Then, for the first time that night, he whispered aloud the question that had been rotting inside him for years. Who can I trust? No answer came. Only footsteps, growing louder, climbing the stairs, coming straight for him. And Michael finally understood. The list wasn't just names of the past. It was a list of the people who would decide his future, whether he lived it or not. Michael stared at the leather-bound journal lying on the table in front of him. His handwriting filled its pages, names, dates, places, and warnings. Each line represented a piece of his past he wished he could erase, but couldn't. He had written every word because he needed to remember what love had once blinded him to see. Not everyone who smiles at you is on your side. Midnight light slipped into the room through half-closed blinds, casting thin stripes across his face. He leaned back in his chair, exhausted but unable to rest. He had spent the entire night replaying a single conversation with Catherine, a moment that made him question everything again. Michael, you can't carry the whole world on your shoulders, she had said gently, touching his cheek. Not everyone deserves the pieces of yourself you give away. He wanted to believe her, but the years had taught him otherwise. He flipped to the last page of the journal, the page he feared most, where a list stood alone. A short list, but one with gravity heavy enough to break him. The ones who will hurt me last. His pen hovered above the final blank line, the space reserved for the name he didn't want to write, the name he wished would never belong there. Thunder echoed outside, shaking the window slightly. It made him jump. His nerves were on edge. Every sound felt like a threat, every shadow a presence. He rubbed his hands together. trying to steady himself. That's when he heard footsteps. Not the heavy, intentional steps of security, but slow, unsure, pausing between each creak of the wooden floor. Someone trying not to be heard. Michael froze. His security team had left him alone for the night, at his request. He didn't want to be watched anymore. He didn't want cameras, guards, doctors, managers, anyone. He needed peace. But peace wasn't what he got. He rose quietly and pressed his back against the wall, peering toward the doorway. The hallway beyond was dark, stretching into silence. The footsteps stopped. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on him again. But then, a voice. Low, familiar. "Michael, you awake?" A sharp breath escaped him. His muscles tightened. It was the last person he expected tonight. One of his closest advisors. Someone who handled his contracts, his tours, his strategies. A man with a calm demeanor and a too-wide smile. Someone Michael once called family. Michael forced his expression neutral as the man stepped into the room, holding a folder under his arm. "You're still working?" he asked, voice too casual for the hour. "Couldn't sleep," Michael answered, sliding his hand over the journal to hide the writing. "You're thinking too much again," the man said with a soft laugh. "Just trust me. Everything we're doing is for your comeback. The world is ready for you. You just need to let us handle things." Michael nodded politely, but inside his alarm screamed. They always say they're helping you, until you're the one paying the cost. The man placed a folder on the table beside the journal. Michael tensed. "What's that?" Michael asked. "New agreements. We can go over them tomorrow," he replied, dismissive. "But I wanted to check on you. Make sure you're cooperating." The word struck like a punch. Cooperating. Not okay. Not feeling supported. Not getting rest. Cooperating. Michael forced a smile. "I'm fine." The man stepped closer, eyes drifting toward the journal, and Michael's hand covering it. "What are you writing?" he asked, too curious. "Just thoughts," Michael replied quickly. "Personal things." The advisor nodded, but his eyes didn't move away. "You know, some things are better forgotten. The past doesn't help anyone now, especially not you." Michael's breathing slowed. "Sometimes the truth does help," he said quietly. "It reminds us who we can trust." The man's smile twitched, and in that tiny flicker, that crack in the mask, Michael saw everything he needed to see. "You don't need to worry about trust," the advisor said smoothly. "You have us. We take care of everything, even the distractions." Michael's pulse hammered. Distractions, like people they wanted gone, or like him. The advisor stepped back, patting Michael's shoulder. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow is a big day." He left without another word. Michael stood frozen in place until he heard the distant click of a door shutting. Then he collapsed into his chair, adrenaline shaking through his veins. He grabbed the journal with trembling fingers and flipped it back open to the final page. The blank line stared up at him like an accusation. He whispered the hardest truth he had ever spoken aloud. "I know who it is now." He wrote the name. His hand shook the entire time. When he finished, a tear landed on the ink, smearing the first letter. He pressed the journal to his chest, breathing through the panic rising inside him. He wasn't paranoid. He wasn't imagining betrayal. He wasn't wrong. They were already moving against him. And tonight, he had confirmation. Someone he trusted was waiting for the perfect moment to break him. He closed his eyes and held the journal tighter, whispering like a prayer. "God, please don't let it be too late." Lightning flashed again, illuminating his terrified face. Michael finally had the name he feared. But now, that name had a reason to fear him back. And the house suddenly felt less like a home and more like a trap. The meeting room at the rehearsal studio was freezing cold, the air conditioning roaring above them like a restless storm. Michael sat at the long glass table, twisting a silver ring on his finger as he waited. He had been summoned abruptly, told this was urgent business. No details, no explanation, only tension. His chest tightened. His notebook, the one containing the names of those he feared would betray him, remained tucked under his arm. He held it like a lifeline. Kenny Ortega walked in first, concern etched across his face. "Michael, I didn't know they called you here. I thought you were resting." "They," Michael murmured, eyes narrowing. "Who is they, Kenny?" Before Kenny could answer, the door opened again. In walked two executives Michael recognized. Men who had once praised him as a visionary. Men who smiled only when money increased. They carried papers, contracts, numbers. They didn't even greet him. They simply took their seats. Michael's heart began to pound. They're here to corner me again. Finally, another figure entered the room. The man Michael trusted most. The one he believed protected him. The one whose name he had written third on the list. His manager, the man who promised to keep him safe. For a moment, Michael forgot how to breathe. "You wanted to see me?" he asked, though fear already told him the answer. His manager sat down slowly, fingers steepling together. "Michael, we need to talk. Time is running out. The tour must go forward, and we can't afford another delay." Michael stiffened. "I told you my health matters. I need rest. I can't give my best if I'm collapsing backstage." The manager leaned forward, voice turning cold. "You don't have a choice." The sentence hit harder than a slap. Michael blinked, his throat tightening. "No, you don't have a choice. My name is on the billboards. My voice fills the arenas. Without me, you signed a contract." The manager snapped. "And your problems don't change that." Kenny stepped in. "Hey, that's enough. He's human." "Is he?" the manager interrupted, turning his stare toward Kenny. "Because the world doesn't think so. They expect perfection." Michael's heart twisted. He had heard those words before. From fans. From the press. From his father. But hearing them from someone he trusted, someone he led into the last fragile pieces of his life, felt like betrayal in its purest form. Michael spoke softly, voice trembling. "You're pushing me too far. We're getting you the help you need." His manager said, "Dr. Murray is doing everything to keep you performing." Michael's fingers tightened around the notebook. "He's not helping me. He's controlling me. I feel trapped." The executives exchanged looks, cold, calculating looks. His manager sighed dramatically and stood from his chair. "You are the product, Michael. The world bought their tickets. You owe them." Something inside Michael cracked. Not loudly, not visibly, but deep, deep where only truth lived. He pushed his chair back and stood up, his hands trembling with adrenaline. "I owe nothing but art," Michael said shakily. "Music, kindness, love. I don't owe anyone my soul." His manager laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you burned through hundreds of millions of dollars trying to be a saint." Michael froze. The room stilled. Kenny stepped in front of him. "Protective now. You're crossing a line." The manager ignored him and moved closer to Michael. Too close. "You want to rest?" the manager whispered. "Rest doesn't pay. Rest doesn't perform. Rest doesn't save you from bankruptcy." The executive sat stone-faced, watching like this was entertainment. Michael felt sick. The walls shrank around him. He gripped the notebook tighter, recalling every page where he'd written fears no one believed. He swallowed and whispered, "I know who you are now." His manager frowned. "What does that mean?" Michael pulled the notebook close to his chest. "I wrote it down. I know who will betray me. And your name is in this book." For a moment, just a second, his manager's expression cracked. "Fear. Real fear. You're tired," the manager said quickly. "You're confused. You're imagining." Michael stepped back. "No, I see clearly now." Kenny placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "Let's go. You don't need this." Michael nodded slowly, but as he walked away, forcing himself not to look back, he heard the manager hiss. "He's slipping. If he tries to cancel the tour, we'll ruin him." Michael flinched, every word sharp as a blade against the spine. Kenny squeezed his shoulder. "Don't listen to them. We'll figure this out." But Michael barely heard him. All he heard was that final sentence, echoing like thunder inside his skull. "We'll ruin him." He had written the truth. His notebook wasn't paranoia. It was prophecy. And tonight, the betrayal finally revealed its face. Michael held the notebook tighter than ever as Kenny guided him into the hallway. His hand shook, but his eyes carried a new fire. Not fear, not weakness, determination. He whispered to himself as they walked out of the studio. I will survive this. I will protect my children, and they will never owe me again. But as he reached the exit, Michael stopped cold. His manager was standing across the room, smiling like he had already won. Michael looked down at the notebook in his hands, at the list that had foretold everything. Name number 3 had come true, which meant names number 1 and number 2 were still waiting. And whoever they were already closer than he knew. The pages of Michael's diary lay scattered across the Persian rug, illuminated by a single shaft of moonlight slipping through the curtains. He stared down at the one page that refused to leave his mind, a page written in shaky handwriting, the ink appearing almost torn into the paper rather than placed gently by his pen. A name, a single name, circled over and over again until the paper nearly ripped through. He couldn't bring himself to say it. Not yet, not even to himself. His hand hovered above the page, trembling. He was sweating despite the cool night air. The silence in his bedroom felt like it was listening, watching him, waiting for him to admit the truth he had tried for years to outrun. Javon stood a few steps behind him, arms crossed, chest rising and falling with tense breaths. He had never seen Michael like this, paralyzed, fragile, frightened. Not of crowds, not of rumors, not cameras, but of a single human being. Michael. Javon said gently, "You wrote that name. You need to tell me why." Michael wrapped his arms around himself, backing away from a notebook as if it were toxic. His voice broke into fragments. I never wanted to believe it. The truth was like glass lodged in his throat. Javon crouched, picked up another page. This one was dated years earlier. The writing style more confident. Calm, clear. These entries were about joy, about music, about his children's laughter, about how the world still had beauty in it. But all those pages, every single one, led to this, to the name. What did he do? Javon asked. Michael pressed a shaking hand over his heart, as if trying to keep it from collapsing. He ruined my childhood, he whispered. Javon's brows furrowed. Your father? Michael shook his head slowly. No, this name is worse. Javon didn't understand. Not yet. Michael stepped close to the window, staring out into the backyard, the same yard where he often sat with his kids, where he laughed and rehearsed dance steps barefoot in the grass. It no longer felt safe. Nothing did. He walked into my life when the world decided I was valuable, Michael said, voice hoarse. When I became someone that wanted to own, to control. He blinked back tears. He said he cared. He said he loved me. He said he would protect me. Javon's fist tightened. He had seen false loyalty in Hollywood more times than he could count, but never to this degree. Michael turned toward him, eyes filled with a pain that had been waiting decades to be spoken aloud. But everything he did was so that he could become the most powerful person in my life. He wanted to decide who I was, what I did, where I went, who I loved, who I trusted. Michael's voice dropped into a breaking whisper, and he nearly succeeded. Javon leaned closer. So you wrote his name down to remind yourself? Michael shook his head again. No, I wrote it down to warn the world. He kneeled beside the notebook once more. His fingers traced the inked circle around the name. Hesitant at first, then slowly accepting the truth written by his own hand. I told my mother once, he said. I told her I thought he was going to be the one to destroy me. She begged me to walk away from him. But I couldn't. I thought, if I just worked harder, if I just did what he wanted, maybe the nightmare would stop. Javon's voice softened. And did it stop? Michael looked up at him with hollow eyes. It only got worse. The rain tapped against a window, gentle, almost sympathetic. Michael wiped a tear with the back of his hand. But the second his fingers left his cheek, another tear fell, and then another. The flood he had kept inside for far too long had finally broken through the dam. "All these years," Michael whispered, "and he's still in control of everything around me." Javon knelt beside him. "He's not in control anymore. You are." Michael's laugh broke, a small, hopeless sound. "No, Javon. I'm just a puppet on a stage. They won't let me leave." He gestured around the room. "The guards, the gates, the contracts, the pills, the pressure. Every decision I make is filtered through him or someone like him." Javon placed a steady hand on Michael's shoulder. "It doesn't matter how powerful he thinks he is. You survived him. You're still breathing. That means you can still take back your life." Michael looked at him with gratitude, but also with fear. "It's not just my life," he said, choking on the words. "It's my children's, and they know that." The realization sunk into Javon like a punch. This wasn't about fame, not about money, not about legacy. This was about control, the kind that destroys everything in its path. Michael lowered his voice to a whisper, one that carried more terror than any scream. "I know exactly what he's planning next." Javon held his breath. "What, Michael? What is he planning?" Michael finally lifted the page, the one with the name, and handed it to Javon. "Read it," he said, "and then you'll understand." Javon looked down, and what he saw made his entire body go cold. The name of the man who would betray Michael Jackson wasn't someone distant, wasn't someone unexpected. It was someone who had been standing next to Michael for years, someone with access, power, and opportunity, someone who had already taken the first step. Javon slowly raised his eyes to Michael's. "When did you realize it was him?" Michael closed his eyes. "The night he told me he loved me." A long silence settled, thick and devastating. Then Michael spoke again, and his next words promised what was coming. "He's not done yet." The sun had barely risen, yet the estate was already buzzing with the unsettled energy left behind from the night before. Michael stood alone in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a warm mug of tea he hadn't sipped from. Steam drifted upward and disappeared long before it ever reached his face, just like every moment of calm that tried to exist in his life lately. He didn't remember falling asleep. He only remembered fear slowly draining his strength until exhaustion dragged him under. But as morning light filled the rooms of the house, something inside him felt different. Not safe, not relieved, just awake. The letter lay on the counter in front of him, folded neatly, edges crisp. Javon had returned it to him quietly when the sun first broke, as if handing someone their own heart back after it had been pulled out. Michael stared at the paper like it had a pulse. The words he wrote, the names he recorded, initials, not full names, but clear enough for him to understand. The betrayal he had predicted. It was nothing new. Not really. People had used him, lied to him, drained him, sold pieces of him since he was a child. That was the true curse of being Michael Jackson. Loving too deeply in a world that never loved him back the same way. But this time, it hurt differently. Because he had written that letter during a moment of absolute honesty. A moment when secrets he tried to bury for years crawled their way out. A moment when pretending to be okay was no longer possible. He picked up the paper with shaking fingers. 3 short lines. A memory. A warning. A truth. Written in his handwriting. "I know who will walk away when I break. I know who will benefit from my fall. And I know who will pretend to cry." Michael folded the note again and placed it gently into his jacket pocket, close to his heart. It didn't protect him, but it reminded him that he wasn't imagining what he felt. Just then, Javon stepped into the kitchen, quiet as ever. His eyes searched Michael's face, looking for signs of fear that dominated the night. "You didn't sleep much," he said softly. Michael kept his eyes on the counter. "Nightmares." Javon nodded. "Sometimes the things we fear most are the things we already know." Those words struck Michael harder than anything written on the note. He finally looked up. His voice was fragile. "Why do people think I'm stronger than I am?" "Because you survived more than most people ever could." Michael swallowed. "Surviving isn't living." Javon didn't respond because there was no correct response. Only silence and empathy. Michael inhaled deeply. He needed air. He needed distance from walls that listened and shadows that whispered. He walked out to the veranda, letting the sunlight hit him directly on the face. For a moment, he closed his eyes. The warmth reminded him of childhood summers, simpler times before the world claimed ownership of his existence, before contracts and accusations and faceless crowds turned him from a boy into a commodity. He whispered to himself, "Why do they want to break me?" And then something unexpected happened. He felt tears, not from fear, not from despair, from resolve. He wiped his face and stood straighter. It was time to stop letting others decide what he feared. Time to stop believing that betrayal defined him. Time to stop giving ghosts permission to follow him. He opened his eyes and stared out into the garden. Every tree, every stone path, every beam of sunlight felt like a reminder. He was still here. Not the legend, not the performer, just Michael. He took the letter from his pocket and held it over his heart. This wasn't a curse. It was clarity. Knowing who might betray him allowed him to choose who he would trust instead. It allowed him to hold close to the people who never asked for anything, the ones who supported him, protected him, loved him quietly. People like his children, people like Javon, people who stayed. The door opened behind him. "Michael," Javon said gently, "you have a choice. You can let this destroy you, or you can let this make you unstoppable." Michael nodded slowly. "I've been afraid for so long," he said. "Afraid of what would happen if the world saw me break." "Maybe," Javon replied. "Breaking is what shows the world you're real." Those words settled over Michael like a blanket. For the first time in what felt like forever, he breathed without trembling. He folded the letter for the last time, walked to a small outdoor fire pit, and set it inside. He struck a match and dropped it gently into the metal bowl. The paper curled. The ink blackened. The names disappeared in flame. Michael watched in silence until the fire died down. The fear didn't vanish, but its power did. Javon stepped beside him. "What now?" Michael looked out the horizon, eyes focused, expression steady, heart steadying itself with a new rhythm. "Now," he said, "I make my own ending." And as he walked back inside, leaving the ashes behind, he knew he wasn't running anymore. He was rising.